And welcome back, everyone. This is our last company presenter today. We still have a great presentation happening afterwards. We highly recommend staying around for it, but we're going to be here learning a little bit more about Newrange Gold Corp. And in order to do that, we have Robert Bob Archer, who from now on I'll be referring to as Bob. But Bob, you are the CEO and director. We're really excited for you to go through this presentation. Like the same format as all of our different webinars today, we're going to be going through a presentation. We have a great video that I believe we're going to be starting off with as well. Throughout this presentation, please, we'd love to hear your comments, but we'd also love to hear, and probably even more so, your questions. So in that Q&A section, you can write your questions down. After the presentation and after the video that we'll play, we will turn over to a question period where myself and Bob will go through them. I'll be asking them, Bob will be answering them, and we'll get through as many as we can by the end of this webinar. If there are any questions there after the fact, by all means, we'll make sure we get access to you to reach out to the company, whether it's via email or whatever it be, to get those answers as well. So just before I turn off my camera and Bob, before you're taking over, in the handout section, I've now shared the corporate presentation that you'll be going through right now. If you'd like to, you can go to the handouts, you can download it on whatever device that you're on right now, and you can have that to follow along on your own time, but also to have for yourself as well. So without further ado, Bob, I will pass it over to yourself, and I'm looking forward to hearing and seeing what you have in store for us. And you just call me back on when we're going to get over to the Q&A function at the second part of this webinar.
Great. Thanks very much, Brandon. Appreciate the introduction, and thanks to the entire team for hosting this great event. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for sticking around and listen to the presentation. Before we get into the slide deck, we do have a video. It's 5 minutes long, but it's playing this beforehand will, I think, give you a very good feel for the project in Nevada and what we're doing, and it'll just make it that much easier to visualize things as we do go through the presentation. So without further ado, I'll click into the video, and then we'll get to the presentation after that. The Pamico Project encompasses several gold mines, and this was once a pretty well-known district in Nevada, once known as one of the highest grade gold districts in Nevada. We have about 300 old mine workings, going back to the days of the old mining, and within that, probably more than 8,000 meters of underground workings, and our guys have been mapping and sampling those workings. So we're standing at the portal to the Merritt decline on Newrange's Pamlico property in Nevada. The Merritt decline was put down in 2013 by the family who owned the property, and it's essentially just a ramp that goes down underground at an angle of about 12 degrees, so fairly shallow slope. And the previous owners put it down to follow up on some high-grade drilling results that they had achieved from surface. And their idea was to start conducting some mining, small-scale mining at this site. We sampled the walls of the decline, and we got assays averaging about 2.92 grams per ton gold over 75.5 meters at the end of the decline. So with some very high-grade individual results within that, up around the 100-gram range. But it's certainly an indication of one of these high-grade pods that we know about. And one of the interesting things actually is that this is entirely separate from the Pamlico Ridge itself, which is just off to the southwest of us here.
I'm standing at the portal of the 5471 level of the Pamlico mine. To the right of me, you can see a small exploration stub at it that was driven just to explore this highly mineralized fault zone. And then this exploration shaft was sunk on that same structure. That goes down about 30 feet. This level goes back into an extensive series of stopes that actually go all the way through the mountain. From this level, we can, in fact, go up through a series of stopes and come out the far side of this ridge. Some of the ore out of here was very high grade. We've announced sample intervals in here in some of our previous press releases. The average grade here is somewhere around 1.5 grams with high grade samples exceeding 1 ounce.
So I'm standing in front of the portal to the main haulage way for the historic Pamlico mine. This probably would have been accessed in late 1800s, early 1900s, so a lot of history here. The adits that we see in old mine dumps up in the hillsides above us, these would have been the main access ways for the miners getting into the different levels and mining the gold mineralization in the hillside. And then they would have dropped everything down through an ore pass inside the mountain and down to this level, and then they would have hauled everything out here and then placed it out on the dumps in front of us. And we think that this is the largest mine dump on the property, dating back to the historic mines.
The area that we're looking at right now is what we refer to as the gold skarn zone. It's a zone of highly anomalous skarn mineralization. It developed in sedimentary rocks, primarily limestones. The ridge that you can see behind me is the entire skarn system, and the small knoll at the far end of that ridge is intensely mineralized with strong visual mineralization and historic soil geochemistry that indicates a 200 ppb golden soil anomaly covers that hill. The overall dimensions of this skarn zone are more than 750 meters in width and 1.5 kilometers in length. This particular zone is a very recent development on the property. We had no idea this was here when we acquired it. And we'll be doing a lot more work on this, consisting of soil geochemistry, potential trenching, and of course a lot of geologic mapping leading on into a drilling program in the future.
Okay, here we go. So you don't need to watch that again. But hopefully that gave you a little bit of a feel for the project that is essentially our flagship project in Nevada. So we'll just run through the presentation now and can fill you in a bit some more details on the project and the rest of the company. So, of course, always recommend people do their own homework, and we will make some forward-looking statements. Is exploration after all. So, so the project that we call Pamlico in West Central Nevada offers a very unique opportunity for the company and for shareholders, simply because it was at one point one of the highest grade gold districts in Nevada, but it has been in private hands since 1896. And so it's never really seen much in the way of modern exploration. And that presents quite an interesting opportunity for us. We've also picked up a new project up in the Red Lake area of northwestern Ontario that I'll tell you a little bit more about. We're well financed for exploration through 2020 and possibly even into 2021. The company is led by a team of successful mine finders and company builders. And both Robert Carrington, that you saw in the video, is one of the co-founders of the company, and myself just joined them fairly recently. But both Bob and I have been in the business for more than 40 years. And we've run various companies, found mines, and more recently I was co-founder and CEO of Great Panther Mining, which is now a mid-tier mining company with operations in Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. So just a location map as to where the property is situated in West Central Nevada in what's called the Walker Lane Trend. Lots of prolific mines and districts along that trend. and including the Round Mountain gold mine, which is just to the east of us, owned by Kinross, one of the largest gold mines in the world. And of course, I'm sure people are well aware of Nevada's position in terms of gold production globally, and it's the largest gold producer in the U.S. as well. So it's a great address. It's considered one of the best mining jurisdictions in the world to be operating in. And it's an exciting project. I'll just point out on this slide before moving on to the next that this little inset here of the gold is not there just for show. That was actually taken off the property, and it's a good example of the beautiful coarse gold that the old timers were looking for and mining back in the day, back in the late 1800s. So Pamlico is really a near-surface, high-grade, oxidized gold deposit. As I mentioned, it's a legendary district dating back to the late 1800s, virtually unexplored prior to Newrange coming along. And we have an option to earn 100% on the property from the family that owns it now. It's just off of the major highway between Reno and Las Vegas, about 12 miles outside of the town of Hawthorne. So infrastructure is terrific. As a power line crosses the property, we've done some preliminary metallurgy, which indicates recoveries up to 97% just by leaching. So we do think that it will be ultimately heap leachable, which brings the processing cost down quite substantially. And it's a large enough property to encompass the entire district. And with that, we still have many targets still left to test. You can see some of them here outlined in red. And the Merritt area with that decline that you just saw in the video just lies just in this central area here, or west central area. And there are multiple target areas all around that. Including the Pamlico Ridge, which you saw in the video as well, and the Scarn zone down to the southeast that Bob Carrington introduced. So all of these areas have gold at surface, and but as none of it's really been very well explored, we're still in the process of trying to better understand the geological environment and how to better approach this from an exploration standpoint. So just looking at another view of the decline that you saw, just some sample intervals, and I'm not sure how visible this is on your screens, but suffice to say that that 75.5 meters of 2.92 grams started from the end of the tunnel down here and worked back upwards. So it's a very significant zone, and that was essentially previously unknown even by Dick Merritt, who put the tunnel down himself. He was just chasing this high-grade zone at the end, and ultimately that was his goal. So this has told us that there's quite a significant zone of mineralization there, but it's also shown us that the mineralization occurs as very high-grade fractures and veins up to several ounces per ton. You can see some grades on here, in some cases over 100 grams. And then in between that, some lower grade material such that the whole thing averages out at about 3 grams. And so, that told us at that time that, we weren't just looking at potential for a high-grade underground operation such as the old timers were looking at. This really did have potential for open pit type mining methods, particularly given how close to surface we are here. So when we drilled our first holes ourselves back in 2017, we found essentially the same sort of thing we were seeing underground, whereby we were getting some very high grades. You can see on the top here, up to 341 grams in individual samples. But decent widths of very high grade material. But then when you average in some of the lower grade material in between, it indicated that we had several tens of meters of still very respectable grade for an open pit. This led us to the concept that what we might be dealing with here is a series of high-grade pods, as I mentioned in the video, that are sort of scattered throughout the district, and being close to surface and oxidized. If these could be selectively mined, then that would lead to some very attractive concept for open pit mining. With this slide, we can just see a cross section through that zone with some of the drill holes, and it's really just, it's a little bit conceptual just to show where the mineralized zones are. You can see that it's very close to surface, and really we're just looking at about 50 feet or about 15 meters below surface here to get to the mineralization. And we're intersecting some very high grade zones with the lower grade material in between. So all of this could be taken out through open pit mining methods quite easily, and would be very cheap. So from there, that zone we were just looking at sits down in here, what we call the Merritt area. That's, you can see the shadow there, the start of the decline itself, and the tunnel comes out in this direction. And you can see, or rather, the drilling that we did was just down in the little gully here. With the current and ongoing drill program, we have been testing along Pamlico Ridge, along the old Pamlico mine, and the Gold Bar mine as well, drilling some holes along there. And in the second half of the program that we're just into now, we're just drilling some holes up here in Gold Box Canyon, and a few check holes or delineation holes down here in the Merritt zone, and we're just getting roads ready up backside of this ridge to access the top of the Good Hope mine, and drill some holes down through here, where you can see we did pick up some very good mineralization in the underground sampling of around 13-14 grams per ton. Over 25 to 40 meters of strike length. So we know there's some good mineralization left in the hills here, and I would like to be able to drill through that to see what that looks like in the third dimension. So prior to starting the drilling back in January, we completed a geophysical survey, which is called induced polarization, or IP. And what this does is it's a method to pick up fine-grained disseminated sulfide mineralization in the rocks. And the reason that's important is that we find that the gold in this area is often associated with fine-grained sulfides. Now, when we talk about the oxidation level, that's quite deep in this area here that we drilled previously. And you really don't see much in the way of sulfides in the rock, and you can see that there's not really very much reflected in the survey in this area for that very reason. And the anomalies that you do get are quite subtle, but interestingly, there is a subtle anomaly right here that correlates extremely well with the area that we've drilled already. And so that gave us some hope that perhaps the rest of these anomalies that we're seeing, which are deeper, are going beyond the level of oxidation and reflecting fine-grained sulfides at depth, and may also in some way be associated with gold mineralization as well. Now, I should throw a caveat in there that it's very often the case that gold will be associated with sulfides, but the reverse is not always true, where all sulfides are associated with gold. It would be nice if that was the case, but there is no method to directly detect the gold in the rocks. And so with this very large anomaly here, though, and these lines are 300 meters apart. So, this anomaly here is at least 1 kilometer long, and many hundreds of meters wide. And we do feel that there's a very good chance that it could be reflecting a buried intrusive rock that could have provided the heat and the fluids as a source for some of the gold mineralization. As part of this drill program, we will be testing this large anomaly, as well as some of these smaller ones coming off to the side as well. So at this point in time, we're a little bit more than halfway through the program. We are using RC or reverse circulation drilling. We're planning probably at least 70 holes. I suspect we'll actually go beyond that, given where we are now. And then at some point, probably take a bit of a break. But we are assessing the assay results as they come in. And I mentioned that we had done some drilling along Pamlico Ridge in the first half of the program, and we were seeing some higher grade fractures in that area with some lower grade material in between. So you can see the assays here, 9.5 grams over 1.5 meters, but with wider intervals of 0.5 gram over 41 meters. And in an area like this, close to surface in Nevada, great infrastructure, 0.5 gram is still very much, it could be economic, given or depending on the size of the operation. So many of the operating mines in Nevada are operating at average grades of less than 0.5 gram. So I've mentioned that we'll continue testing those the IP anomalies and where we're drilling. Towards the end of that program with the reverse circulation, there's a good chance that we'll switch over to diamond drilling at that point to test some of those deeper IP targets. And the nice thing about diamond drilling, getting core as opposed to the chips, the rock chips that you get from the RC, is that with the core you get much more structural information, much better geological information. And so we may drill some select holes in places to just for that information as well, to follow up on some of the better results that we're getting. So I did mention that we had picked up an additional project in the Red Lake area. It's in the Greenstone belt, just to the east of the Red Lake belt itself. And the Red Lake belt is getting a lot of attention these days with the exploration success that companies like Great Bear are having, with other companies putting old mines back into production. And so it's a very prolific area in its own right. And I've got extensive experience in this particular area back when I worked with Newmont and Placer Dome. And Bob Carrington also worked up in here as well with Gold Canyon when they held the Springpole deposit, which is now owned by First Mining Gold. And that's the largest deposit in the Birch-Uchi belt, sitting at 4.7 million ounces in resources at the moment. And right now, there is no mine in production in this part of the belt, largely due to a lack of infrastructure. There is road access into Red Lake, but there's no road access right up into the northern part of Birch-Uchi. So our project sits right up in the northern part here, and we call it the North Birch Project. And this is just a magnetic map of the entire belt, but we'll zoom in on the northern part here. This is an outline of the project. And what's important here is that from the magnetics, you can see the contorted folded pattern, and that becomes quite important because there's a lot of these patterns. The high magnetic response is from a rock type called iron formation, and it gets its name from the fact that it's very rich in iron and it's highly magnetic, and that's why it shows up on the magnetic surveys. And with these folded iron formation patterns, this is quite typical of iron formation hosted gold deposits, the largest of those being the Homestake mine in South Dakota, which is now closed but produced over 40 million ounces of gold. I believe it's still one of, if not the largest past producing gold mines in the US and one of the largest in the world. There is an operating mine similar to this in a little farther north in Ontario called the Musselwhite Mine, and it's still in production, owned by Newmont Gold Corp. And I worked on the pre-feasibility study up there in 1994. And so I'm quite familiar with these types of deposits and this model. This area has really intrigued me because of the folded iron formation, and the main target horizon coming through here has never actually been drilled. There are gold showings around in the southern part of the property and the core of this fold. I've been a few holes drilled through here, gold on surface, And there is gold known in the iron formation, a few spots where it comes to surface. But for the most part, this horizon is buried under overburden. It's not exposed, and it's never been drilled. So it's a brand new target that, we appreciate the fact that it's somewhat conceptual, but if we do find some success here and find some gold in this horizon, then we have about 8 kilometers of strike length along here to drill it out. So lots of upside, and we hope to be testing that this coming winter. So in terms of upcoming catalysts, news flow at Pamlico, I mentioned we're drilling somewhere in the order of 10,000 meters reverse circulation and diamond drilling on various targets. We will be modeling those mineralized zones as we go in 3 dimensions to get a better understanding of those. And of course, continue on with surface mapping, some underground sampling as well of the various zones. At North Birch, unfortunately, due to COVID restrictions in Northern Ontario, we only just got our permits in September, and a little too late in the season to embark on any kind of a summer field program, because winter tends to set in a little earlier there than in most other regions. And so during the period where everything's freezing up and snow starts falling, it's pretty difficult to get out there for prospecting and mapping. So everything will be deferred now until the winter, when everything is frozen solid and it's a lot easier to access. And at that point, we'll be able to get in there with line cutting and IP up there as well. Same sort of idea, picking up sulfides in the rocks. And from there, we should be able to generate drill targets that we can test probably by about March, I would say. On the corporate side, we are getting, or have gotten, and are getting warrants exercised, which has been funding the drill program to date, and will continue to do so. Those expire just what would it be, next Monday, I guess, on the 26th of October. And so that'll reduce any selling overhang that we've seen in the stock to date, and provide a bit more upside there as well. But in addition to that, we have been selling off the assets that we had in Colombia, because the company was focused there prior to moving into the US in 2016. So we've been monetizing those projects, and we still have cash and shares to come in from those sales. And so with all of that, the warrants and the Colombian assets, we should see about $3 million coming into us over the course of the next 4 to 6 months. So that should fund the balance of the exploration that we see for the foreseeable future, without having to go back to market. So just speaking of the market, you can see here our share structure, about 122 million shares on issue. Some of those warrants, these are not all the warrants that are expiring, by the way. There will be still a few out there, but this should get reduced quite a bit over the course of the next week. But with the recent share price in the 15-16 cent range, market cap's a little under 20 million, but the stock is very liquid. Our average trading volume in Canada and US is about 1.3 million shares a day. So it is a very liquid stock for the size of the company, and also considering how tightly held it is. Insiders have about 9%, institutions about 10%. And a very loyal group of shareholders own a little over 30%. So there's really only about a public float of about 50% of the stock. So lots of upside here, and lots of catalysts, news flow to come, and we're pretty excited about the prospects for success at Newrange. And so with that, I'll wrap it up and pass it back to Brandon for a Q&A session, and would certainly invite anyone who has any questions to reach out, and I'd be happy to answer them as best I can. So thanks very much for your attention.
Absolutely, Robert, and thank you as well. Very, very detailed presentation, short and sweet, but right to the point. I love it. And I just appreciate, once again, all of our investors who are taking the time to be in here. I see some questions are rolling in. I really do enjoy seeing investors being active and taking the opportunity to speak with the executives running the companies that they're interested in. It's very important. So with that being said, why don't we jump into the very first question here, Bob? And this question is, when do you expect to switch from RC to diamond drilling?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've been sort of playing that a bit by ear, and it depends to some degree on the contractor as well. But I would say, let's see, we're almost into October. I would say in perhaps about a month from now. So towards the end of November. We still have some more RC holes to drill, and just for reasons of support and logistics and so on, we don't want to have both drills there at the same time, because then obviously we'd have to double up on staff and things like that. So we will transition from one to the other, but I suspect it'll probably be towards the end of November.
Absolutely. Our next question here is, at the beginning of the presentation, Bob mentioned they have an option for 100% of their property, or of the property. What is the current percentage ownership, and what further payments and exploration work would be required for the company to acquire the full 100% ownership?
So it's a great question. There are no exploration or expenditure requirements per se. It's entirely up to us. It's just a straight cash payment, no shares, and those payments are made once a year, $250,000 US to the family. The total cost is $7.5 million, of which we've paid about $1.25, I guess. There could be a prepayment option. And that's something we can look at down the road. But as it stands right now, there would be a little bit over $6 million to just pay it out for 100%.
Appreciate that. We'll continue to move on here. As I'm just going to go back and forth with our mics there, just as a little bit of feedback, but it sounds perfect right now. Can you explain the recent volatility in your share price?
Yeah, certainly. I suspect what the viewers referring to is the run-up that we saw at the end of August, which was really based on pure speculation of results from the first pass of the drilling. And as you saw in the presentation, we did get some very high-grade results in 2017 in that Merritt zone. But as I mentioned, when we started the drilling, we weren't drilling in the Merritt zone. We were drilling up along Pamlico Ridge, and so there seemed to be some speculators, and I'll use that term instead of investors, but who were looking for a quick return, a quick run up in the share price, because they were expecting the same sort of very, very high grade results. And so the expectations, I think, were a little bit unrealistic, given that wasn't what we were focused on. And so those people buying into the stock ahead of results coming out pushed the share price up to around 43 cents. And then when we came out with the first set of results, they were more along the lines of what we expected, like I showed in the presentation, but they weren't matching the super high grade results like we had in 2017. So when those results came out, there was a massive sell-off from those speculators that were looking for a quick buck, and so the share price fell back, and then of course we've seen the gold price fall off since then as well, and that's brought the share prices of all the mining companies down a little bit from those lofty highs in August. So that's largely what caused the volatility at that time. And but last week we put out some good results from a couple of holes that we did drill into the Merritt zone, and the stock reacted well to that. We traded 5 million shares on that particular day, but that again allowed people to exercise some warrants, and so we're seeing that balance of people buying in versus people exercising their warrants and selling as well. But it helps that we do have that liquidity. Sorry, go ahead, Brendan.
Absolutely, yes. The next question here is, I think I'm going from the bottom actually. So for everyone who's on top there, I didn't mean to skip your questions, so I'll go back up at the top here. This one is from Mark, and he's asking: initial drilling along Pamlico Ridge revealed high-grade structures surrounding by lower grade. Might you expect better continuity at Gold Box Canyon? Expectations for Good Hope?
Well, at Goldbox Canyon is a very interesting target because it's never actually been drilled before. Not by us, not by anyone else, as far as we know. And it gets its name from the fact that the sides of the valley are quite steep. And the most prospective horizon is at the contact between two rock types, the uppermost of which is quite hard, and that's what gives the steep sides to the slope, so coming up from underneath it makes it very difficult to test that horizon. So you almost have to get up on top of the ridge and drill down through everything, which presents its own logistical challenges in terms of road building and so on. And I think this is one of the reasons why there haven't been any previous drill holes in there. So there are some structures going across the valley floor as well that do seem to be gold bearing, and we're trying to test right now those structures as well as where they potentially intersect that favorable horizon. So this first pass on the drilling is very much exploratory to see what we get, and then we'll interpret those results and then likely come back for a second round. The sampling that has been done on surface and in underground and some of the old workings in Gold Box has been very good. I mean, they're very good, very high grade samples in places. So it's difficult to predict what we might get, but I suspect there's a good chance that we could see some decent grade in narrow structures surrounded by lower grade materials such as we've seen elsewhere. As far as Good Hope goes, we have the underground sampling there to go on. So we know that there's definitely mineralization still there that hasn't been mined out. And it's a matter of being able to position the drill holes or position the drills up on top of that ridge, to properly test those particular horizons. So topography does play a role in our ability to do that. It does become a little bit challenging, but obviously we're going to try to drill in the best places we can and to get the best results we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you once again for that answer there. Our next question is from Pat. Have all the outstanding warrants now been exercised, as I know they expired recently on October 19th?
We had some options that expired perhaps around that date. The warrants themselves actually expire on October 26th, so that's just coming up next Monday. And I know that some are getting exercised as of today even. We still are seeing some getting exercised, but a week from now, that'll all be behind us.
Perfect. And we'll go on to another question here from Jason. You mentioned you would you mentioned you would have around $3 million in cash between warrant exercise and sale of the Colombian assets. How will that be allocated between Pamlico and North Birch? What area is the priority?
Well, the priority at the moment is certainly Pamlico, and we have a drill on site, and the drilling's ongoing, and as long as we continue to get good results, we'll just keep drilling as long as we can. The nice thing about that project, you can see how wide open it is, and being where it's located in Nevada, you can work here year round. There's no weather restrictions such as there are up at North Birch. So, we will be able to do the geophysical survey at North Birch, starting in January, but won't likely be drilling until March of next year. So that's still 5 months away, and we'll have to assess things at the time and see where the budget stands. But certainly, I think $3 million buys quite a bit of drilling, particularly RC. So I think we should be well enough funded for both projects.
Absolutely. Our last question for today is coming from William, and he asks, are there any other geophysical surveys being contemplated other than IP?
At Pamlico, not really. We have flown airborne, but aside from some structural information, it didn't really help all that much. And there was a gravity survey conducted as well. The type of mineralization that we're seeing there, is not amenable to any electromagnetic methods or even some other methods that I'm familiar with, but I won't get into the details. So, we're not really contemplating anything other than IP. What I will say is that we are contemplating additional IP, especially towards the south and the southeast over that skarn zone that we have some interest in. We did run one line of IP across that skarn zone and picked up a couple of nice chargeability anomalies. So I'm not sure if we'll actually be drilling those right away as part of this program, or if we'll do some more IP on those first before drill testing them. Up at North Birch, the area has been flown with MAG and EM several times, and we have those surveys, and we've actually merged 3 surveys into one that we've used for our interpretation. And I plan to put out a news release in probably a couple of weeks or so on that, and on our plans for North Birch for the winter. And so at this point in time, there's nothing further planned for that project in terms of ground surveys, just the IP.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, I appreciate very much you taking your time going through all these different questions. Lastly, if someone was to reach out to you, where would you like to direct them? So if they're watching this either live or after the fact, where would you like them to be directed? Website, your email, wherever that be?
Sure. Well, certainly there's lots of information on the website, and that's just www.newrangegold.com. We have a great media page. We've got a photo gallery, all kinds of photos. We've got videos, including the one you just saw, several others where the guys on site, film specific videos of our guys sampling underground and so on. So lots of great information there. For specific questions, they can either send emails to info@newrangegold.com or just straight to myself, just at rarcher@newrangegold.com.
Absolutely. Well, once again, Bob, I appreciate this very much. For all of those in attendance, we do have one last quick webinar coming after this with Nico Pronk, CEO of Noble Capital Markets. I highly recommend tuning in for that and hearing what he has to say. But for everybody that is here, I appreciate the time that you've taken here. And once again, Bob, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day today as well.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Brandon. Thanks to all the organizers. Good work.
Absolutely. Take care now.